back at the fair. There's really no place like it. And I guarantee you a little mud on your boots ain't going to slow anybody down while you're here. You know, this is my 6th speech at the fair as governor. And I'm glad to have back with me this year on the stage Marcia, my bride of 38 years. Let me say to the 24 or so of you who have reminded me this morning how far I married up over my head. Guys, I don't need any reminding. All I ask is that you pray that the grandchildren look like her. You know, I remember 1982, the first time I ever spoke in this pavilion. Our country was in a recession then too. In fact, we'd had several recessions over a period of 8 or 10 years. Ronald Reagan led us out of that deep recession, and for the next quarter of a century, the number of Americans working skyrocketed as we had 49 million net new jobs in 25 years. American technology changed the world in ways we couldn't have imagined that day in 1982, and more than 1 billion people around the world were lifted out of poverty in 25 years. Today, a new president facing another deep recession has gone in just the opposite direction from Reagan. This administration and the extremely liberal Democrat Congress have gone on a spending spree that give drunken sailors a bad name. The federal deficit will leave the federal budget this year will leave a $1.8 trillion deficit, more than double the previous record, driven by multi-trillion-dollar spending programs for stimulus, to bail out Wall Street, to take over General Motors, and that's before you even consider the president's $3.5 trillion budget for the fiscal year that begins October 1st. This spending guarantees huge tax increases, federal debt that our grandchildren will be dealing with when they're my age, not to mention a weaker dollar with accompanying increases in gas prices and higher interest rates. We in Mississippi can heave a sigh of relief that our state government hasn't fallen in that direction. We've had balanced budgets by keeping spending under control. We've built up a rainy day fund and are spending it prudently over a period of 4 years. We've protected our reserves for the future. A lot of people deserve credit for this, including many legislators. And I want to thank them and give them the credit that they're due. But don't get me wrong. Mississippi faces very serious budget problems, and they're just around the corner. These troubles will begin in the next fiscal year 2011, and will get much worse in fiscal year 12, which is not as far off as you might think. Fiscal year 12 is the budget year that will be considered by the legislature in January to April of 2011, less than a year and a half from now. It also happens to be an election year. The massive amount of federal stimulus included in this year's budget, the budget year that started just a month ago, masks the deficit problem and the budget problem we're going to have in the near future. Despite the fact that state revenue was nearly $400 million below the estimate, and about 4% below what we collected last year, spending for the current fiscal year is at record levels. State spending is going to be more than $6 billion. This while it is virtually certain that state revenue will go down even further this year. Reduced state revenue means most state departments and agencies took cuts from last year's levels, and most are actually spending at levels below those of 2 years ago. Public safety, the health department, mental health, you can go on and on. Bill, the governor's office is taking a 6% cut. Yet, because of the massive amount of federal stimulus money and the federal requirements for spending, this year's spending on K through 12 schools is increased to 7.2% more than the previous record. Universities and community colleges are getting record appropriations. You know, education is the #1 priority of Mississippi State government. We spend about 63% of the general state budget on education. However, it is not sustainable to use temporary federal funds to push up K through 12 spending by 7.2% when you're cutting law enforcement and other important state agencies. When the extra federal money goes away, we will not be able to keep education spending at the top of that tall mountain, because the rest of state government will have already been cut, not once or twice, but probably 3 times. Our budgets for this year and next year will include nearly $1 billion of temporary federal funds that won't be available in fiscal year 12. Because of this coming budget cliff, I recommended to the legislature that state government be streamlined and right-sized over the next year or so. Phil Bryant made a start with his Commission on Government Waste, but I believe we've got to go beyond that to a major restructuring based on a review of every program, of every agency, of every department. The reason we have to do that is because the likelihood is our revenue is not going to get better soon.